Hurricane Sam has leveled off on its intensity. As you can see at the satellite, the hurricane does not look nearly as impressive as it did a few hours ago. And we'll go ahead through the NHC's latest. This is the cone. We'll come back to that in a second. Here's the public advisory. Hurricane Hunter aircraft finds Sam has peaked in intensity. That's the new news. That's, quite frankly, that's good news if you think of it, because this thing isn't going to be strengthening anymore. Data from the reconnaissance aircraft indicate that maximum sustained winds are near 145 miles per hour with higher gusts. Sam is still a Cat 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Some fluctuations in intensity are expected during the next day or so. Thereafter, slow weakening is forecast. However, Sam is still expected to remain a major hurricane through midweek, so that's good news. They found Hurricane Sam was at 150 miles per hour last advisory, so it has leveled off and weakened a little bit. So that's good news. It's not going to weaken very quickly, but it has leveled off a touch. So it's tropical. Nothing has changed with the hurricane tropical storm force winds. It's still a small hurricane. The pressure has risen back to 943 millibars. So yeah, that's good. That's good news. Well, that's a slight amount of good news considering all that's been happening. But anyway, this is the cone according to the NHC. This is the 150 is the strongest it's ever going to be. So it's not going to strengthen anymore. You can look at the satellite. The structure of it doesn't look nearly as impressive as it did before. As you can see, that eye started shrinking about here, and then, yeah, at first when I saw the eye shrinking, I thought it may be strengthening because generally the eye contracts whenever a hurricane starts strengthening. But then it basically shrank down to this, and generally that's not a good sign because the eye just snapped like that. It just shrunk very fast, and for a hurricane like that, that's generally not a good sign for that. Also, I noticed that from a few hours ago, convection was like this. Now it's this. So yeah, Sam does not look nearly as good as it did 6 hours ago. So that's some good news. It's still a strong hurricane, but we are finally getting some good news. You can see how that western side of the hurricane just collapsed. Well, yeah. And there's the eyeball somewhat exposed. But holy crap. Yeah, this saw a huge tear, and it's just a huge, just a huge change for the better, for the better essentially. Change for the worse of the hurricane, the better for everyone else. But yeah, that's what it looks like now. That's a huge development, quite frankly. We're going to first go to the tracks, then we'll go to the intensity. So the first thing, the models are in somewhat of an agreement. The CTCI has us going a little more towards the west, that it's going to continue moving at the same direction. Leeward Islands, you're going to see probably some surf, probably some waves. If the hurricane does start to expand in size, you could see a little bit of rain, but that's about it. For Bermuda, if this hurricane gets close enough, you could see some tropical storm force winds, similar for what you experienced with Hurricane Larry. I just wanted to keep those two things in mind before I continue. Now to the intensity. The majority of the models have it kind of weakening at this point. Some of them have it keep leveling off and going back up again. That's likely not going to happen. Majority of these models have it weakening, which is a good thing. And by a week out, some of these models have it going down all the way down to Cat 1 strength, which it would be great if it did that, because that way Bermuda would experience a far weaker hurricane than it is now. The majority of them keep it at Cat 3, some Cat 4, but if it goes down to Cat 1, that would be very good news. Now back to the satellite. We're going to play this out for what happened. The eye started shrinking, and that core just started looking not nearly as good as it has over the last couple of days. And as you can see, there are issues with it. We'll play it back again. There it goes. There it goes. Eye shrinks. And there's some dry air in it. This is where the center of circulation is, right here. So, yeah, such a drastic shift over the last 6 hours. That's how quickly these things can intensify, as we've seen, and that's as well as basically just start not looking so good in shape. So yeah, I'll be keeping a close eye on it down the road. Hopefully this means its intensity starts going down. That would be very good news. Now now to the final key takeaways before we close off the video. First key takeaway: the hurricane has weakened a little bit to 145 miles per hour, down from 150. It reached its maximum peak. It's now only going downhill from here. So that's the first key takeaway. The pressure is back up to 943. So that's something interesting right there. Second key takeaway: models still in agreements. Like if you're in the Leeward Islands, you're not going to see really any impacts when it comes to rain. You could see some high surf, some rip currents. So starting tomorrow, I would consult your local officials before you go out swimming or anything. So keep that in mind. If you're in Bermuda, 6 days down the road, you could see some tropical storm force impacts, some rain. I'll be keeping a close eye on it. But yeah, this hurricane has been a very powerful storm, and it's been quite an interesting one to cover, quite frankly. Third key takeaway: it only weakens from here. It's weakens pretty slowly. Some of them have it going all the way down to Cat 1, maybe even a low end Cat 2. Majority of them, though, keep it at a Category 3, which is probably where it's going to be. If it goes down to a Cat 1, that would be good news. So that's takeaway 3. Key takeaway number 4: the core of this hurricane looks a lot different than it has in the 6 hours ago. This was that's not quite there. This is where it was about 6 hours ago. So this is where it was. This is now. So this thing looks much different as a hurricane. This thing is truly struggling at this point. We'll get back. Come back. We'll come back together. Only one way to know. We'll have to wait. So I'll be keeping a close eye on this. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more updates.